So this is going to be Kerry's day 3. And we decided that there wasn't much to say before the recording started, except that Kerry had said that she's not using the rubric that she had originally been using. And we will see as to whether that was a good idea or a bad idea. My guess is that it's a good idea, but we'll keep an open mind in that department. Anything else that we should be saying before we look at beep number 1? Then I'd say let's go for it. Beep number 1.
Cool. So for context, I did this entire beep session over the course of a long run. So I was outside, not listening to music the whole time, and I was with a friend. So beep 1 happened at 8:35 in the morning. My friend Drew, who I was running with, was explaining a story, and so in the moment before the beep, I kind of had a scene in my head based on the story that he was telling about people that we knew. So, it was just, my entire experience was very visual in this moment. I was kind of pulling together the pieces of the scene that he was describing, which was basically a chef. So we worked in hospitality together. So a chef that we knew was behind the bar in this restaurant talking to 2 girls that we were both friends with. And then the third girl was kind of off to the side and silent. I wrote visualizing Sam, who's the chef, behind the bar on the left, and then Tammy, Allie, and Katie are on the right. So it's almost as though I'm sitting on the end of the bar with those 3 girls, kind of looking in on this scene. And then I said, based on how focused I was on this scene, it was actually like 70-30, I would say, leaning towards the scene rather than my surroundings. I was like it felt very detailed. I knew exactly where everyone was sitting. I could see the bar. Interestingly, he was talking about a bar that I'd never been to, but I chose a bar in Jackson Hole and like placed the scene at that bar, even though that's not where they were. In the moment, I was listening to him speak and tell the story, but I was very in the visual scene.
So tell us exactly what you see in this scene.
So the bar is a wooden bar. It's a nice restaurant.
So I don't really care about the actual restaurant or the actual bar. At this moment, at least, I'm interested in what your experienced seeing is. Yeah.
So Sam is kind of leaning over the bar, talking to Tammy and Allie, which is 2 of our friends, and then our third friend, Katie, was kind of silent. Because I think she was kind of mad at him. So I was more intently focused on, I think, the social dynamic more than anything, because that's what the story was based upon. So I was really intently focusing on Sam speaking, Tammy and Allie listening, and Katie sort of ignoring everyone. Does that help?
And is this a in motion seeing or a still picture?
This one was more still. I think I could see like Sam's lips moving, but everything felt very still overall.
And in color?
In color, yeah.
Black and white? Okay. And clear?
Very, very clear, very sharp.
As sharp as, more sharp than, not as sharp as if you were actually seeing this kind of scene?
I would say it would be like a photograph with, again, sort of almost loses focus as you get to the edge, and then that's where my surroundings begin. But very sharp in terms of detail.
Okay. So I'm happy with the visual aspect, at least for the moment. Julian, want to ask any questions about that, or shall I move on?
So Sam is on the other side of the bar, and Tammy, Ali, Katie are on the other side from him, or on the same side as him?
on the other side from him, but kind of on the same side as me. It's almost as though I'm viewing this from a fourth bar seat. So I'm looking down the bar.
So you're looking kind of down.
Yeah, and Sam is on
the left. Is there order to where they're sitting, like Tammy, Allie, Katie?
Yeah.
So who's like closest to you?
Closest to me was Allie, then Tammy, then Katie.
Okay.
Which is actually, ironically, I don't know if this means anything or is helpful, but that's like probably the order in which how close we are as friends, I would say. I'm closest with Allie, then Tammy, then Katie.
And is it, what's kind of like the space of this image? Is it just like you see them, or is it like you're looking at an image with them in it?
The spacing of it, is that what you said?
Like kind of the visual space. Like, is it like you're looking at something in front of you, or is it just like you're in the scene immersed? You see them, you see Sam?
I sort of see it as though I'm sitting next to them, so I can't really see their lower half. I only see their upper half. And we're kind of in a line sitting next to one another.
Okay.
And is there sound involved? Do you hear anything? Or you know they're speaking, but okay. So now I would like to move on and talk about the surroundings. So it's obvious that you're listening to what Drew is saying because you're creating a scene, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's in your experience. So you can be processing what he is doing and have your experience entirely wrapped up in this visualization that you're doing. You're obviously processing it because you're making your own private movie about it or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's experienced. Mm-hmm. So I would like to know about the rest of the scene, what is and what isn't directly in your experience, given that none of it has to be in your experience, or all of it might be in your experience.
You mean more broadly in terms of what I'm physically experiencing as well?
So I don't really care about what you're physically experiencing. What I care about is what is directly apprehended, which might be physical.
Okay.
So, for example, you're running, and you're not tripping over the curb or wherever it is that you are. So obviously you're visually processing the roadway or path or whatever it is that you're on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are experiencing that directly in the directly apprehended sense.
Yeah.
You're obviously skillfully processing it because you're not falling down or running into Drew.
Yeah. I would say this scene in my mind was most dominant. I wasn't looking at Drew or really, like, I think he was to my left when he was speaking, but that was not my focus or really part of it. I was, like, hearing his voice. That was a huge part of it because I was listening to the information and visualizing the scene. And I think I was taking in my surroundings enough to not fall, but I did feel more immersed in the scene, I guess, than where I was stepping. I have a general idea of where I was, but not a general idea of, like, what exactly I was stepping on, if that makes sense.
So this is really, I think, part of the very difficult portion, or one of the things that has to be mastered about DES and about experience, because obviously you are in some manner experiencing the roadway and the voice. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. But the question is whether that's directly apprehended by you. That you're obviously experiencing it in enough way to navigate and understand and whatever. But it is entirely possible for that to be taking place automatically, because your interest, for whatever reason, is in the visual space that you're creating, the bar that you're creating. And I'm not trying to talk you out of that. What I'm trying to do is to sort of level the playing field about it. I'm trying to break us of the habit, I guess you would say, of saying, well, because my friend is talking, I must be hearing that. I don't think that's true. Your ears drums are processing it. Your brain is processing it. You're creating a picture based on that. But that doesn't mean you hear it at all experientially, directly apprehendedly experientially. And that's sort of the distinction that I'm trying to get across here at this particular moment.
Can you give an example of what it would be like to hear something experientially versus hearing something non-experientially?
Well, for example, right now I'm guessing that your left elbow is on the desk or the chair or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's been there the whole time, and you've been processing it directly because you haven't fallen off the chair or whatever. But I'm guessing that over the last 5 minutes you haven't been paying attention to your left elbow. It hasn't been part of your directly apprehended experience. You've been skillfully processing it, doing whatever it has to do in order to keep track of that, but not in your direct apprehension.
Okay.
And I think the same thing can happen with a voice. I mean, you could be skillfully processing Drew's voice because you're creating this picture that in your head. But that doesn't mean that you're experiencing directly his voice in a directly apprehended sense. It could be just sort of, I'm entirely wrapped up in the seeing. But it's also possible that I am experiencing that. I'm not. And my goal in this conversation right now is to try not to convince you that it has to be one way or the other, but to convince you, I guess, that it could be one way and it could be another way. And most people, most of the time, take it for granted that, well, if he's talking and I'm understanding, well, I must be paying attention to his voice. But I don't think that's necessarily true. Might be.
I think in this particular instance, I would say I was experiencing his voice because I was very intently focused on the story. I have had plenty of times in the past because I do get sort of lost in scenes and my own thoughts, sort of my own audio, talking to myself while people are talking, where I'm definitely not experiencing their voice. But I think in this particular case, in this beep, I was. It felt like.
And I'm not at all going to try to talk you out of that. What I would say is that the last 5 minutes that we've spent here has been more aimed at next week's sampling than at today's sampling, because I don't think you're in a position to have adequately made that discrimination on this particular beep. It's water over the dam, maybe, so to speak.
Right.
And so I'm not disbelieving you. I'm also not believing you. I'm holding that. I'm holding that as one possibility, and that next time when you sample, it'll be easier probably for you to attend to whether that auditory phenomenon is actually present to you or whether you're skillfully processing it even though you're not paying attention. The way the world is, as far as I can see, is that there's thousands or millions or whatever of phenomenon that are going on around us all the time, and we destroy most of those, even though we process them that skillfully. There's all of your body, and then there's the sound of the air conditioner and the scene outside your window, and whoever's in the next room, and all that stuff. Most of the time, you're just filtering out. Probably, you're processing it because if somebody in the next room said, "Hey, Kerry," you'd hear that, but most of the time it's filtered or whatever.
Okay.
For some people, actually, some people don't filter at all. They got all those things going on all at the same time. So I'm not trying to say it has to be this way or it has to be that way.
Got it. Okay. It's kind of a hard thing. It's a hard thing to. It's like breathing. You don't think about breathing, you just breathe. almost. So, no, not almost. That's what you do. So it's hard to, I think, distinguish between how much a person's voice is part of your inner experience. But maybe knowing this will be easier.
So I think that's a great example. The breathing is a great example. And so I'm guessing that at the moment of the beep, it would be easy for you to say, well, I'm particularly paying attention to my breathing, or I'm not particularly paying attention to my breathing. Mm-hmm. That's a skill that you have. And I think you can master sort of the same kind of a skill about listening to somebody. Either I'm attending. I'm obviously breathing, and breathing skillfully, and doing whatever, getting exactly the right amount of oxygen and whatever. My body is a complicated machine doing its thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's lots of things like that can be happening skillfully without attending to it, and some with attending to it. So I'm good about this beep. I think I'm ready to go on to the next one, unless Julian has.
I did have another question. I was wondering if we would come back to it, but we didn't. But you mentioned something about one of your friends being mad at Sam, and I didn't write down which one it is. It
Katie.
Harry or Katie? Katie.
Yeah.
But is that context, or is that at this moment, like that's part of your experience somehow, or is it just too hard for you to say? Like it's too far in the past.
I think I mentioned that because visually, she was almost in less detail, partially because she was blocked by Allie and Tammy, but also because, she just wasn't as sharp, because it almost felt like my brain was pulling together the dynamic of what Drew was describing. So I felt like that context was important because it is what informed my visual.
Okay. I'm good on this beep.
So that raises an issue that I would like us to talk about. So the question, what do you see, is apparently, well, I see my friends clearly, except for Katie, who's not so clearly. That's what I see. Mm-hmm. And then, so that's the phenomenon that's present to me right at the moment of the beep. I'm seeing this scene. These guys are clear and those guys aren't. Then there's the explanation or the background or the context or whatever about the scene, and I would like us to keep those things separate.
Okay.
So when we ask about what you see, then we're talking about the phenomenon. That's, I see Sam clear, and I see Tammy clear, and I see Allie clear, and I see Katie not so clear.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
But I think that's a great point to keep them separate if they're totally separate. But if there's something here about part of this image is figuring out the dynamic or something, it may well be part of it, and then you could say that. I think it's going to be really hard to tell for this one, honestly. Mm-hmm. But I think that's something you could keep. What do you think about that, Russ?
I think as we develop the skill of keeping track of the difference between context and phenomenon, then it will get to be easier for us to be able to say, well, I was seeing Katie unclearly, or I was seeing Katie mad at Sam. And that could be part of the phenomenon that presents itself.
All right.
That's part of the skill. That's why we need to practice this stuff over some number of days, because we have to figure out
what is important.
What's important for you, and the way you do it, which is not going to be the same as I did it, or Julian would do it, or Mel did it, or whoever else would do it. we have to figure out how to communicate about Kerry's experience, which is what's interesting and what we're doing. Beep number 2.
2.
So beep number 2, the time was 9:11 in the morning. I was visualizing an Instagram post, which was an ad for a thrifting shopping event that is scheduled for tomorrow. So I was trying to almost read the details of the ad to remember what time it was starting and stuff, but it was very much the visual of the ad.
Just a context thing. You got these beeps this morning?
Yeah.
Where? Okay. So when you say for tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So you have, you're visualizing an ad, but and it's a mental picture. You're not like looking at your phone and seeing the ad.
I had previously seen the ad on my phone, and I was almost trying to bring that up in my mind again.
So what do you see?
It wasn't as sharp as I wanted it to be, which was annoying. So I can see almost like a slightly abstract or slightly blurred version of the ad. The ad had cream and sort of light red background and then Western style headline text. So I could see the blobs of cream and red, and I could see like the structure of it, like the way that the brown text kind of curved over in a semicircle at the top. And I knew that there was text down the bottom, so I was trying to get there, but it kind of was just showing up in blurry colors. This was in the shape of an Instagram post, so it was 1080 by 1920 pixels. I only know that because I used to work in social media, but it was a much smaller. It wasn't a scene. It was as though there was a card in front of me or an Instagram size post in front of me, centered in my vision, and I was trying to read it, but it was very blurry.
And it's a still thing, right?
Still, yeah. No movement or anything.
So Western text, brown Western text on top. Western, is that as in a font or like a style of font?
No, a style, kind of like what you see if you were to pull up. I don't know if you've ever been to Jackson Hole before, but there's a lot of like saloons and the cowboy bar.
The wagon wheel saloon.
Yeah, kind of what we'd like on a wanted poster almost. So that style of serif text.
Does any of the text say anything at this point, or is it just kind of?
It's very blurred. I wouldn't even describe it as. I know it's text because I had previously seen this exact image, so I knew it was text. But in my mind, in this moment, it was very blurred.
Okay. Do you mean blurred, literally, as in like a blurry photograph where things have these kind of bokeh or whatever? Or do you mean blurred as in indistinct, not filled in, or something else?
I mean blurred. It's kind of hard to describe because I'm thinking of it from like a design, like a Photoshop. But you can literally in Photoshop put like a blur layer over an asset, and it will just slightly make stuff illegible. So it's like everything is just softened slightly. If that answers that.
Yeah.
Or when you're looking at something and you can have you ever blurred your eyes, like you can blur your vision?
Yeah.
That's what I was kind of seeing, almost that blur layer over something I had originally seen in a sharp sense.
Some people might mean blurred as in, just the detail isn't there, or sometimes it could be like the literal, the Photoshop blur effect.
Yeah.
So cream and red background and kind of Western style brown font, and something at the bottom, blurry colors at the bottom, but do you know what those colors are, or?
It was a thinner text with details about the event, so it wasn't the same as the headline text. It wasn't as bold, but it was the same color, so it was the same brown, with 2 lines towards the bottom that were blurred, though, so it kind of just looked like 2 very fuzzy rectangles almost.
And the scene is, it's not like you're fully there immersed in it, it's like it's in front of you?
Yeah, almost like honestly, like an Instagram post size in front of me. So I would say I can see more of my surroundings, and I'm trying to read an ad that I had previously seen that was quite small.
Is it overlaid on your surroundings, or is it in its own kind of space? Like the image is in a separate thing from the surroundings? Or does that not make sense?
For me, yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. For me, it's overlaid in my surroundings. It's as though it's layered. So if these are my surroundings, it's like that. So I can't see what's behind it. It's not see-through.
Okay.
It's a lot smaller because my surroundings are bigger in this example, but it's as though it's layered over top of it.
And are you paying attention to the surroundings at all at this moment, or is it really just about the image?
I think I'm processing my surroundings because I was running on a trail and I wasn't following. But I would say, as an example, I wasn't quite aware. Drew was either to my right or behind me. I wasn't really paying attention to him. I was really trying to focus on the details of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of the question Russ was asking before about how much the surroundings is part of it. And here it does seem to be much more, or maybe even entirely on the image rather than surroundings.
Yeah, I think in this instance, it felt less immersive. Sorry, this scene, it wasn't really a scene because it was just one thing that I was really trying to bring up in my mind. So that felt less immersive than other scenes that I have put in my mind previously. So I could see more of my surroundings, and I think I was slightly more aware in this instance just because it wasn't a full scene. It was just one thing.
Yeah. Is there like a trying to remember as part of this? Is this a kind of remembery scene? Or is that just context? Like you're trying to remember, but at this moment it's really just visual, like you're just seeing this thing?
That's exactly what I was doing. I was trying to remember the details. And this is actually how I would take exams for context. So I used to write everything out, and then I would read my notes when taking an exam. So it was almost as though I was testing myself to remember the details of this event. So I was trying to see it so that I could tell Drew whether or not I would be going to the event based on the time, but I couldn't see the details, and therefore I couldn't commit to the time.
Okay. So it's... Yes, in terms of one option is it could just be a visual experience. You're just seeing, the red background and the brown font and whatever. And then it could be like this visual as part of like a trying to remember. So you think it's more the second option?
Yeah.
Or?
I mean, the visual, I think, was only pulled up in my mind so that I could give an answer as to whether or not I would be attending, and that to me was part of remembering the time. So if I could remember the time, then I could make a decision, but I couldn't remember the time.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing on the question of context and experience. Like, it could be that trying to remember is just the context, or it could be that it's part of it. So yeah, I think that's a really tricky question. And yeah, we can keep looking into that. Russ, do you have something to say about this?
So I'm just gonna plug my laptop in.
You muted, Russ? I think you're muted.
Oh, I think he's, yeah.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. What I was saying was that we've talked quite a bit about colors, cream color, red color, brown color, whatever. Are you particularly interested in the colors, or is that just a fact that I'm telling you what color this was? I'm seeing this scene and they happen to be cream color and red, or is it like I'm somehow particularly interested in the red or the cream color or the brown?
I wouldn't say I'm particularly interested. I think I think in this instance it was really trying to refer back to what it was in reality. So like how it looked like, and I was trying to, it's almost like I was trying to do something that I couldn't see without context or something. And it just happened to be those colors. I wasn't particularly passionate about those colors.
And I would say we talked a little bit ago about, well, this is a small thing, and so there's more of the surroundings to be seen or something like that. I wasn't immersed in it. That I would say that that's a plausible story, and it might very well even be true. And I'm not saying it is or it isn't. What I'm trying to get us to do, I think, is to bracket away what I call the plausibilities. That because something seems like it ought to be that way, that's the way it must be. That's the kind of thing I don't want us to do. I would like us to pay attention to what actually happens, whether it's plausible or reasonable or unusual or wacky or whatever. This is the way. So this is just the way the experience is. So it could be. I think it's entirely possible. I've sampled with people who have a very small visual thing, and they're entirely into that. That's only a little small piece of their visual field. The rest of their eyeballs are no doubt processing that. The retina and the LGN and whatever else that processes your visual experiences are doing their thing. But as far as my directly apprehended experience, it's just this little postage stamp that I'm looking at. So I'm not saying I'm not believing you. What I'm saying is it takes some practice to be able to set aside what seems like the natural world. Pay attention to what's there. And I would say we're doing a good job. We're doing exactly what it is that we need to be doing here. So I'm happy as a clam as to what's going on.
I don't know what this is about to say, but I was kind of taken aback at how visual all of these beeps were. Because normally it's a lot of audio going on in my brain, but this morning it was almost exclusively visual, which is very interesting. I don't know why.
So what I would say about that is, yes, I agree that it's interesting, and it could very well be that you've got more visual stuff going on than you thought. So you're mistaken about thinking that you're always audio, or it could be that this was an unusual day, and for whatever reason that today was a visual day, and all of those things would be equally interesting to me. I don't favor one of those approaches, or one of those results over the other. What's interesting to me is to try to get each individual one right. And then after we've sampled for half a dozen days or whatever, then we can go back and say, well, I do have a lot of visual stuff. Or we could say, well, that was a crazy day. I had a lot of visual stuff then, but I don't have any visual stuff any other. We'll have the data about that. As opposed to what I call a faux generalization. What seems like a reasonable story about myself, which might be true, but might not be. And so I would like us to set all those things aside. My technical term for that is to bracket that, to put all those theories. I'm an audio person, well, maybe I am, but let's put that in brackets, which means let's not go looking for it. And let's not let's not try to color our actual experience with some expectation about that. That's what I mean by put that stuff in brackets.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see whether it is or see whether it isn't. That's what makes this stuff interesting, actually.
Yeah.
On to number 3.
I got to run for a charger. So, sorry.
No worries. Do you want me to wait?
Yeah, we probably got to wait.
I'll wait. It's okay.
So are all the beeps today in the running?
Yes, I think except for the very last one. I was home and not running, but all the first 5 were on this run. It was a long run.
Okay, and I'm just filling time here. I'm not saying I like one set of beeps.
Yeah.
Where were you running?
Actually, at the base of the Tetons, on this really beautiful trail around Jenny Lake. I can try and show you a photo. I don't know if this will pop up, but it's very pretty.
That's cool. That's very pretty.
All right.
All good?
Number 3.
All right. Number 3 was at 9:28 in the morning. And this one was actually just, I was just playing the chorus of a song from a band that I like. I wasn't listening to any music on this run. Drew and I weren't talking, and I was just, I don't know if you've heard of the band Always before, but I'm seeing them in September, so I've been listening to their music a lot, just generally, and this chorus was playing over and over in the moment before the beep, and it was just saying, there's no holding, I'm not going to sing it, but I was hearing it sung in my mind, but the line is, there's no holding back, so I think it went off on holding, and I was repeating that.
And by repeating, do you mean just that section, there's no holding back, there's no holding back, there's no holding back, there's no holding back? And by hearing, do you mean I hear the band the way I would hear it if I were listening to a recording of it or whatever?
Yes, it sounded as though the song, like I had headphones in my ears, even though I didn't.
Exactly, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So
I've been playing this song generally on repeat, so I felt like I had a pretty good recollection, and so to my knowledge, it was as similar as the band.
And I don't think you're in a position, or anybody else is in a position to know whether things are really veridical, but you are in a position to know whether it seems like they're vertical, and that's really
to
what
me.
I'm
It seemed like it, yeah.
Okay, and so you're hearing it just the way this band actually sounds.
Yes.
And are there any distinguishing characteristics about it, or is this the experience the same as hearing it in headphones?
I think the only distinguishing factor about it would be that I only knew the next line, so I couldn't like continue with the lyrics, if that makes sense, or in the minute leading up to it, I couldn't remember any other lyrics, so I was just singing this one loop of the chorus. Because I couldn't remember the other words. So that's the only distinguishing factor, is that it was a bit of a loop rather than the full song. Okay.
And so what I'm understanding you to be saying is not like I'm experiencing myself as not knowing, so I have to go back, but I don't know it, and so the fact of the matter is that I'm going back. But what I'm hearing is this section of the song, and then this section of the song, and then this section of the song again. And while I'm hearing it, it seems like I'm hearing the band playing it.
Yes.
Okay. And is there anything else in my experience at this particular moment?
I felt more present in my general surroundings. It was a really beautiful section of the lake. Drew was right behind me. I didn't have any visuals laying on top of my surroundings. It was very much, I wasn't really thinking. It felt like I wasn't thinking anything. And I was just a little bit more present in what was going on. This was the closest thing I've ever felt to not thinking, I think.
Thinking is a turns out to be a strange word, actually, in my world. But
Yeah.
So would you say that you're more into the song that you're hearing, or more into the scene around you, 50-50, or that question doesn't make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. I think it's probably 80-20. It was almost as, in terms of surroundings, to the 20% of the song. The surroundings were definitely more dominant. I guess it's a little bit hard to say. Because it did, like, I was hearing it, but it didn't feel, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm lost in pieces. It didn't feel as dominant as some of my other thoughts. It felt like background music, or, background music is probably a good way to explain it.
Okay. And then about the surroundings, what is present to you?
The trail, the rocks on the trail, the brush / the mountainside is on my left side. I noticed how clear the water was, and I could see the rocks through the bottom of the water, even though I was at a distance. I could see in the horizon where the trail was going to eventually turn and kind of end, because we were approaching the end of our run. So I felt like I was taking in a lot of visual detail. I know exactly where I was in that moment.
And that's quite a lot of detail. Is all of that directly present to you? So at the same time as I'm seeing the rocks, I'm also seeing the water, and I'm also seeing the boulders underneath the water, and I'm also seeing the trail, all present to me at the same time?
I would say it was probably more focused on most focused on the water, and how clear it was, and how I could see the bottom, even though I was technically on a trail that was about 30 feet above the water, and I could still see the bottom. So I was visually more focused on that, but because you're trail running and you could hit a rock at any time, I'm kind of looking out and then down to make sure that I don't fall. So I wouldn't say they're necessarily equal. In that moment that the beep went off, I was looking at the water mainly.
So that's a good example of what we were talking about a little bit ago. So there are mountains around you and whatever, and those mountains are clearly in your experience in some way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are directly apprehending the mountains at this particular moment. You could be sharing your experience sharing your directly apprehended experience between the rocks under the water and the trail, in which case you've sort of annihilated experientially the mountains. They're gone for you at that particular moment. They'll be back a little bit from now, but for that particular moment, it's possible that you've destroyed them.
Yeah.
Or it's possible that the mountains are still some kind of a presence for you experientially. I don't want to rule out either one of those things, but I want to use it as an example of how it's possible, of all the things that are around. Your original description was of sort of the whole landscape, which was probably a true story. The mountains are over there, the trail's going this way, it's turning up to the left, I'm 30 feet above, whatever. All those are facts of the universe that you were in at that particular moment. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all those things are experientially present to you at that time.
I think that's a really solid point, and in this moment in particular, the mountains were not. I was not experiencing the mountains. I was experiencing 80% of the water, 20% of the trail, in terms of the visual of what I was taking in this exact moment.
Okay. And anything else in your experience?
No.
So, for example, you're running, your feet are moving, your feet are hitting the ground, your arms are swinging. Your breathing.
Yeah, all of that's happening. And I guess the only other thing is, heavy breathing at this point but that felt very physical. I don't know if that's relevant. I don't know.
So the question is whether it's directly apprehended, which it could be or it might not be. So and I don't think we're in a position to be able to answer that question looking back. This conversation, most of the conversation today is mostly about tomorrow rather than yesterday, basically. This morning. And so what I'm trying to get us to do is to recognize that there's a lot of stuff that's going on that I'm skillfully processing, my breathing and my footsteps and my arm swinging and where my partner is and how tired I am and what time it is, and meetings are coming up when, and how hungry I am and all that stuff. I'm processing all that stuff, but not necessarily before the footlights of my consciousness at any particular time.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. As you're talking, I'm changing my rubric. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
I don't know whether it is or not. We're gonna what I think we're about here is we're trying to figure out how we can talk to each other in a way that we know what we're talking about.
Right.
And it's a challenge. And it's not like I'm trying to hold something back and I'm only telling you what it's just, I don't know what's important to talk about with Kerry. Mm-hmm. Kerry doesn't know what's important to talk about with us. We gotta try to figure that out. Mm-hmm. One of the distinctions that we're going to have to try to make clear is to what extent things are what I sometimes call before the footlights of consciousness, which in this particular case sounds like might be the clear lake with the rocks underneath it and the trail. And the rest of that stuff is context or whatever. Mm-hmm. But we got to get practice in noticing that, and it could be that next time you will come back and you say, oh, the rest of all that stuff that I said was there. It wasn't really there at all. It was just the picture, and that's it. That might be true. Yeah. Or it could be the next time you'll come back and you'll say, all those things that I said probably weren't there. Well, they really were there. I've got the mountains. I am seeing the mountains and the trail and the water and my footsteps and all that stuff are all directly present to me at a particular moment. Either way would be fine with me. I don't have a preference other than we try to get at the way Kerry's experience actually is.
Mm-hmm. I think this is all making more sense to me. So it's a good learning process.
It always is a learning process. So I for sure, I don't want you to think to yourself, "Oh, I'm a dummy. I should have been able to figure that out." That's not true. That's not possible. We have to go through this kind of a conversation, mm-hmm. and most people don't, which means most people don't really understand each other. But we're trying to work it out, and it takes some effort.
Yeah.
On to number 4?
I think this is...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Number 4. Okay. Number 4, the time was 9:39, and I was still running, and I, in this moment, was visualizing my neighbor's dog's face. I'm trying not to give you too much context because I don't want to project things, but that's what I was seeing in that moment.
As long as you separate context from what you're seeing, you think is useful. So the neighbor's dog's face. So what exactly did you see?
The dog specifically, it's an older dog, so it has a bit of gray hair on its jawline. It's kind of an orangey color. It looks like a yellow lab, but with a slight red tint. He has sort of big brown eyes, and he constantly makes a face where it looks like he's smiling really big, so he's kind of like this all the time. And so that's kind of the...
So can I interrupt this story to make... So there's a big distinction between the way he always is and the way he usually is and what you saw at this particular moment.
Okay.
So what Julian was asking you about... What... Okay.
Yeah.
So here is he doing the smile thing, or...
He's doing the smile thing because I was telling Drew about his smile. So, yeah, I was visualizing that as I was commenting on it.
So there's a dog, he's orangey, he's like yellow lab and reddish. He's doing the smile. Is focused on any particular part of this picture, or is it just you see a dog, or is it like I'm more seeing the smile of this dog, or the eyes?
I would say the facial expression was the most important part. I didn't have any of his body, but his ears and the top of his head and stuff were less of my focus. Like the focus really was the smile and kind of his eyes.
Okay.
His
You're
expression.
not focused on his body. Isn't there in this mental image a body, a background stuff, but it just you're not focused on it, or is there not any?
There's no body. It was almost like someone cut his head out of a photo or something, and I was just looking at his head.
Mm-hmm. So this dog with his facial expression, smiley. Is there anything else at this moment?
I was in the middle of a sentence telling Drew I'm late to walk a dog. Or I'm late to walk this dog that I had previously been describing as a very smiley, happy dog. And so I was speaking in this moment. I said, I'm late. I think it beeped at... No, because I finished the sentence. So it beeped at when I said dog. After I'm late to walking this dog.
All right. I want to go back to the visual thing. I think I was too quick moving on from that. So you're seeing this dog's expression. It's more just the expression. There's no like body, whatever. What is that like? Is it overlaid on whatever's actually in front of you, a trail or whatever that is, or is it just is it its own thing or something else?
This was overlaid, but also I'm kind of I would say I'm the least confident in this visual compared to the other ones, which were very clear in my mind. I can't really remember, it was hard for me to discern how big his head was in comparison to everything. Like in the other ones, I felt very confident in what I was saying about how dominant they were. This one was kind of, I don't know if it was because it was just his head, and rather than a scene or what, but I was the least confident in this visual, if that's an issue, I don't know.
So confident about what, like the size of it, or what was in it, or the color?
Just how dominant it was in my brain. I think originally I wanted to write that it was small because it was just his head, but then it felt larger as I was writing that, so I didn't write that down. But it was just his face, and I was thinking about and focusing on his visual expression.
Yeah. I guess what Russ was saying before, like just because something should be small doesn't mean it is in your experience. Like just because it's just a phone picture doesn't mean like all of your attention can be there. Like just because it's just his face and not his body doesn't mean it has to be smaller. It could just take all of your attention. So,
This one felt bigger, but I think it was bigger, but I'm just not as confident on this one.
okay. So, and bigger could mean like visually bigger, like just bigger in front of you, or it could be that just all of your attention is somewhere and it doesn't matter how visually big or small it is because just your attention is there. Does that make sense? Or is there more you could say about how this image appears?
I think I was pretty immersed in his facial expression, and therefore it felt more dominant in my experience, and it felt bigger, even though, technically speaking, his head would have been, if I was looking at him in real life, smaller.
Mm-hmm. And Russ?
Yeah, can I want to make sure I understood about you mentioned that I'm not confident about this one. Are you, and I want to know what it is that you're not confident about. Are you saying I'm not confident whether I'm actually even seeing this? Or are you saying, well, I'm seeing it, but I'm confident, I'm seeing the dog clearly, but I'm not confident about some other stuff?
I think I feel less confident about this one because the beep was going off and Drew was still talking. So as I was writing it down, I was kind of frazzled and trying to go back to the exact millisecond to right before the beep. So that is where the lack of confidence comes from. I definitely was visualizing his face in that moment. But because I was, the beep was going off and Drew was talking, I was like, wait, stop, I need to focus. And I couldn't even remember in the next, few seconds how dominant this image was in my mind.
So there's no question. I'm totally confident that at the moment of the beep, I was seeing something about the dog's face. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And what I'm not confident about is some of the aspects of that, how that fits in, or how dominant it is, or something. Okay?
Yeah.
And I would say this things happen, and we're not shooting for perfection here. We're trying to do as good a job as we can, and sometimes we fall short of that.
So because it was maybe harder for you to tell how much was in your experience, I'm going to drop the line of questioning about if it's overlaid on the world, like what you're seeing in front of you or not. I think those are really hard things to distinguish. Mm-hmm. But I would like to move on to the sentence, "I'm late to walk this dog." Are you speaking that, or hearing yourself speak that in your head, or?
I was saying that out loud to Drew. So speaking that sentence.
You're speaking it out loud. But you're unsure how much of your experience was the dog image and how much was the speaking?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it would have been 50-50 because it's like I'm looking at this image of the dog and I'm telling my friend in response to this image of the dog in my head that I need to wrap things up because I need to go walk this dog. But again, I think I was just kind of a little bit frazzled at this beep, so it's hard to discern.
And it could very well be 50-50, or it could be that just because, it should be 50-50 because both of these things were happening. So it must be,
that's what I'm nervous
but it doesn't
about
necessarily have to be 50-50.
So I would amplify that and say it could very well be 0-100. So it is quite possible to be speaking a coherent sentence and not have that in your experience at all. In my experience, I'm totally wrapped up in the face of the dog. I'm telling my friend Drew about that, and the words are coming out of my mouth, but I'm not paying attention to the words at all. The fact of the matter is, those words are coming out, and the beep happened at the word dog or whatever. But that doesn't have to be experienced. Just like you were running at that time, and you were putting your left foot in front of your right foot, and then in front of your left foot, and then in front of your right foot, and you weren't paying attention to that at that particular time. Probably you're doing it skillfully. It was coming out of your body. You were doing it. A sentence can work the same way. And I'm not, again, saying that's the way it was. I'm saying what I want us to do is to bracket the notion, well, if I'm talking, I must be paying attention. Excuse me, because things in the imaginary world don't necessarily work that way.
Makes sense.
And in my role as timekeeper, we've hit an hour, so we probably ought to decide whether we're going to do this again. And
I would like to.
Me too.
Great. Me too.